Storytelling is an ancient art form of human expression. It's an interactive art using words and actions to illustrate elements and images of a story, engaging and encouraging the active imagination of the listeners. Storytelling always involves some form of narrative. Narrative is the account or story of events, experience, or the like, whether true or fictitious. Storytelling began from the very beginning, all the way from when cavemen and ancient cultures used to engrave and paint images on the walls of caves, illustrating creatures they'd see, illustrations of themselves and their culture. Storytelling then later evolved further when language went from simple imagery to the written word. Storytelling went to books, to theatre, to then being introduced into film. Film and the ability to record and visually see moving images came around in the 1890s. Initially, the visuals you would see on film were simply visuals, with no narrative. Like when the train arrives at the station, this was one of the first footage to be shown to people. It even made people scream and move out the way, thinking that the train was actually coming towards them when it was first viewed. It then progressed having narrative to footage. Initially, very little narrative was used in film. It would follow a very basic and short storyline. This leads us to the first proper narrative film produced a year later than the trip to the moon in 1903, The Great Train Robbery. This introduced new editing techniques that had never been done before. For starters, it was filmed in different locations, unlike other filming attempts which would keep a stable camera position throughout the whole film. The director had panning camera angles as well as different types of shots like close-up and face-on shots which really connected the audience to the characters. This shot made the audience jump with thrill and excitement when one of the characters points his gun directly at the screen. After this, other films began to do the same thing and started including sound effects and different types of music to help illustrate the footage further. As narrative was introduced to film, so was the different narrative techniques. There are two types of narrative, linear and non-linear. Linear follows a straight, single path from beginning, middle to end, whereas non-linear narrative has alternative, complex paths that intertwine to tell a story. Multiple stories occur, but they all connect in some way. The first film to go beyond the common linear technique and have a non-linear, multi-strand narrative was the film Intolerance in 1916. Multi-strand is more than two stories that run side by side within a film and have various connections to one another, and usually all come together at the end. Intolerance was a milestone in cinematic history and is seen as one of the greatest films of the silent era. The film consists of 4 separate yet parallel stories, each set in different ages. The 4 stories laid in different times of history, 3 out of the 4 being based on factual history, and each with its own set of characters, shows us that throughout all the different ages, intolerance and hatred has always battled against love. This is the theme that connects and links the 4 stories together, and is what you gradually see unfold during the film. These are several films that are famously known for their narrative and how well they've used different techniques to really illustrate the story.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
The Godfather, known as one of the best American films ever made, the multi-generational crime saga goes down in cinematic history. The Godfather has a linear narrative, but at points the narrative becomes multi-strand. Francis Coppola used this narrative technique to highlight important moments in the film. He's used multi-strand at these points to help the viewer to really feel the intensity of these important moments going on at the same time. It also grips your attention as you're watching all these important moments unfold at once. The Godfather uses continuous action, presenting the events in the sequence they occur, with time lapses between some scenes. Camera skills helps to express different elements in the narrative and tell the story in the best way possible. Using these techniques helps the viewers to become more emotionally connected to the story, especially to help us, the viewers, to see the story from different perspectives of the characters. You can do this just through the camera work alone. The opening shot of the film is a good example of when the use of good camera work playing with perspectives is used. The way the scene is filmed makes us view what's happening from different points of view of the characters. We are initially looking from Don Vito's point of view, who is hidden from us. It is as if we are sat in his chair, making the viewer feel like Don Vito himself. As this is the first scene, you don't know whose perspective you are viewing from until the camera angle changes to reveal whose eyes you've been watching through, revealing the back of Don Vito's head and shoulders, then changing angles again to see his face. As the film goes on, we begin to view the film from a more universal perspective, and we then view Vito like any other character. From the opening shot, we know the story as Vito's, and his perception is the only one that matters. As the film progresses and Michael's involvement in the family business grows, becoming a more important character in the story than he was at the start, we begin to see more and more through his eyes, and at a certain point the story then becomes his. This transfer of perspective occurs when Michael kills the captain and Solozzo. Using this type of camera work and showing the story change from different perspectives of the main characters, Don, Vito and Michael, helps illustrate the transition of power in the film by filming it in a certain way. Following the death of Solozzo, we see the brilliant use of editing used to illustrate the story in the best way possible. He uses parallel editing to show the mafia war that follows after Michael kills the captain and Solozzo. He does this by cutting back and forth between the gangsters going about their daily lives and then the multiple newspaper headlines of the mafia war that is brewing. This cross-cutting editing helps illustrate to the viewers the disruptive effects violence has on the lives of the mafia. The most classic use of multi-strand and parallel editing in the film is the baptism scene at the end of the movie, which shows us the deceptive and double life Michael will now lead as head of the family. Boyhood is an extreme example of having a linear narrative. This is due to the fact that the film was shot over 12 years. The film is about a boy called Mason from when he is 6 all the way up to when he became 18. Although the narrative is a very simple structure, this doesn't matter as much in this case as the fact that it is the same boy and his life over the 12 years, which has never been done before in film. It is gripping enough to the audience. It seems to lack a narrative focus or an extravagant storyline, as it is simply a young man's journey of growing up. However, in this film's case, due to actually following a boy's journey of growing up and filming that same boy over the 12 years, it becomes the fascinating element of this narrative story. The fact that it's the same actor at all ages, which normally films use lookalikes at different ages to represent the same character. Because of this unique technique used, with each year jump within the film, the audience is left intrigued about what happened in the spaces of these years. How has Mason changed? Although the storyline might not be very engaging, seeing the real-life growth of the boy over 12 years on screen combined into a 2-hour and 46-minute film is the captivating element, especially as this is something that hasn't been done before to this extent or intentionally. With using the same boy and filming him over 12 years is what gave the narrative life and tells the story well. If they hadn't have done this and they had used different actors for the different stages in the character's life, the narrative would have had less meaning. It would be seen as very basic, as the narrative of the film is, and wouldn't have been fascinating to the viewers. The use of the same boy is what made the basic narrative of the film interesting.
Gentlemen, welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
Fight Club uses a very unique narrative. The film is self-narrated by the main character, and although the film starts on a cliffhanger of the ending scene, it has one of the best surprise endings, which then makes the whole film make sense. Using a cliffhanger at the beginning captures the attention of the audience, especially as the audience is immediately thrown into the deep end, right into the action, with Jack having a gun shoved into his mouth, and a building about to be blown up leaves us hanging at 3 minutes till explosion. This leaves us in a state of confusion and intrigued to carry on watching to find out how it got to this point. If we go on to look at the editing, we see that the filmmakers have edited the film in a way to illustrate the main character's mind state. This is why the film's editing is at a very quick pace at times, so comfort is never really there, and when it is, it's brief. The erratic pace and constant cuts again resemble the chaotic thoughts and life the narrator leads. We also see flashing images of Tyler within the film before we've even met him. These images flash on the screen for a few frames when we are viewing the film from the narrator's, also known as Jack's, point of view. This illustrates that he's appearing in the narrator's mind subconsciously before we meet him for real and before he becomes a conscious vision of the narrator. This is an example of when certain camera work has been used so the viewers emotionally connect with the characters in the film. This close-up when Tyler leans over and into the camera with all his henchmen behind him shows power and dominance over the viewer and the character Tyler is addressing. This type of shot allows us to feel how the character is feeling, allowing the audience to connect more to the story.
Trust me.
So there we have it. storytelling from beginning, middle to end.
You met me at a very strange time in my life.
With your feet on the air, your head on the ground. Try